Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Thank you so much, dear development experts, for joining us today on a national webinar on mountain biodiversity conservation, the state of Pakistan, what we are facing. We will be discussing it in connection with International Mountain Day. That is always celebrated with the Pakistan Mountain Festival. And this is the 10th edition we are on, and doing like online activities because this time, everyone knows about the pandemic and we are not allowed to have gatherings. Otherwise, we have invited you somewhere with the communities and other sort of cultural celebrations. I'm thankful to Ashik Ahmed Khan Saab, Farah Toirov, Deputy Country Representative FAO, and Ali Tawfiq Sheikh Sahab, Rab Nawaz, Senior Director WWF. Dr. Zahur Bazai will be joining us from Balochistan University, and Aisha Khan from Hachu Foundation. Muzaffaruddin Saab has joined us. He has worked with the AKRSP as General Manager and will be highlighting community's role in biodiversity conservation. Then Altaf Hussain Saab will be joining us. He is Executive Director of Gilgit-Baltistan Development Policy Institute. So this is, and we are also joined by Kiran Afzal Saba. She is the Senior Technical Advisor of World Bank on tourism promotion. And she will be speaking about communities' role in tourism promotion in the context of biodiversity, what biodiversity plays role in promoting tourism. So this is the situation. First of all, I will ask a Senior Advisor, Everest K2CN, Senior Scientific Advisor, Everest K2CNR, Ashik Khan Sahab, to brief us about the state of biodiversity conservation efforts in Pakistan. Ashik Ahmed Khan Sahab, please go ahead.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's a privilege to be with you this afternoon. For as long as the conservation status of biodiversity is concerned at the moment, we have both some positive things and some gaps in between. And I hope that we, during the discussions, we will be discussing some of the things with other colleagues. But we have at the moment very good institutional and legal cover, institutional arrangement and legal cover for the biodiversity. People are much aware of the thing as compared to before. The wildlife department is better equipped now. They have more vehicles, they have more stuff, they have more money and everything. So it's a good sign and a good thing. However, the things that are lacking at the moment is that biodiversity is not the task of wildlife department alone. It is something that goes across the many disciplines and the disciplines that are mostly unaware of it. So I think there's one thing like livestock department is equally a part of it, education department is equally a part of it, and several others. But we focus on the wildlife department sometimes, and we take them as responsible for the biodiversity, which is not normally the case. That's one thing. When we come to the gaps, there are two major gaps. Number one, we lack research on biodiversity. We have hundreds of universities in this country with thousands of MPhil and PhD scholars passing out every year. But I have yet to see even a few scholars who are addressing the issues of biodiversity, and especially the management side of it. Then the second one is that biodiversity can't be protected unless the communities who are living around, they cooperate in this and they participate in the efforts. Unfortunately, we haven't yet addressed that issue in total. Some of the things that are very closely related to local community is the culture that they have. We didn't identify those components of culture that address the issues of conservation of biodiversity. Unless we identify those, and then translate that into some kind of action, I think this will remain a dream. So for me, biodiversity, I will say, well, it's both satisfactory in certain cases, and in others, there are serious gaps. But in between, if there are certain concrete questions that are coming up, then I will be addressing these. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ashok Sap, for your very brief presentation. And definitely, I have supplementary questions, and others experts might also have some questions to be asked. Like they
Welcome,
can, yeah.
welcome,
I would
welcome,
like to
welcome. I'm
ask you
available.
about you represent as a senior scientific advisor of Everest K2 CNR, and the organization played major role in developing three 1,300 square kilometer Central Krakatoa National Park, where communities were the main and backbone for the promotion of tourism, culture, and as well as biodiversity conservation efforts. Where it stands now after 5 years.
I personally feel that CKNP, or the Central Karakoram National Park, is better managed as compared to 5 years before.
Hmm.
The people are aware of the importance of the biodiversity of this park, again, more than before.
Okay.
The tourists, when they come to that area, they now know more about the areas to go to as compared to before.
Hmm.
So there are good linkages between the people coming from outside the department and the community. The most important thing is that there is a close collaboration between our department and the community. We are just facilitators, and that facilitation role perhaps is more satisfactory when you see better collaboration and better cooperation between the department and the people. That's our main role of all the NGOs. We don't have a stake in those things, and this is the biggest of the stakes, that we provide a platform for both of them to be together and working together. So that's what I feel now, that even the animals in the park are better protected as
Hmm.
compared to before.
Hmm.
The ecosystems is always, we see some of them is not better protected because people may use them the way they want, and we didn't give them a proper guidelines on how to deal with the ecosystems,
Hmm.
and that's something which is basic all over. When we you talk of the EVK2 CNR in the context of the protected areas, then well, yes, we are very active in the protected areas of GB, but GB is not the only place where biodiversity is found and which we need to protect. So perhaps our scope has to be enlarged, and we have to move around and go to each and every corner of the country, cover other ecosystems as well, and that's where our function will be better seen. Now I see only this, that perhaps there are better cooperation between the department and the people, and we are there to help them further.
Ashik Ahmed Khan, sir, do we have any national strategy for biodiversity conservation and protection of ecosystems?
We do have one for the KP
Hmm.
that has been approved by them as well, but don't know about the others. At the
Okay.
national level, I don't. We have one that's very old and that has to be revised, and
Hmm.
uh, again come up with a new one, because our challenges are now different,
Hmm. Hmm.
and we have gone far from that place. So now we have to do something new.
Okay. Okay. Do you think like the voluntary
And
tsunami sort of initiatives and clean green Pakistan initiatives would help improve biodiversity situation in Pakistan?
well, I think biodiversity is again far beyond these things.
Hmm.
The major focus of the biodiversity is variation in species from coast to the K2,
Hmm.
variation in ecosystems again from coast to the K2. Uh, Through the tsunami and the billion tree things, we do not cover ecosystems in total. We try to have more plants. That is a good step in itself, but it's not all that biodiversity conservation demands. So we have to go far from this and then address some of the issues. And let me share a brief idea with you what we are doing now. EVK2CNR and Lok Versa, they are trying to identify those components in the local culture that are addressing the conservation issues of biodiversity. And if we could come up with some kind of approaches, uh, we will again invite other institutions and organizations to refine this idea further. If we do
Okay.
that, perhaps that would be a new kind of tool that could be used in this. So tsunami and the other initiatives, they're very good, but the scope is limited in terms of biodiversity.
Okay. Thank you, Ashik Ahmed Khan Sahab. Now I would move on to and ask Mr. Farrukh Toirov, Deputy Country Representative, FAO Pakistan, and he will be speaking about mountain agriculture, climate change, and biodiversity. Mr. Farrukh, please go ahead.
Mr. Munir Ahmed, Director, Devcom, distinguished members of the panel today, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Many thanks for organizing this event, Mr. Munir. This is important for us, for our organization. Today we are marking the International Mountain Day, and the global theme of this year's celebration is mountain biodiversity. And that theme is selected not incidentally. The importance of the conservation of the mountain biodiversity is becoming important more and more and every day. And that's the reason why our organization is paying more attention to this global issue, not only here in Pakistan, but also in all the other countries of the world. In Pakistan, as we know, about 60% of the population, 60% of the territory of the area is covered by hills and mountains. So the topics of the mountains and biodiversity are very actual in the context of Pakistan. This is one of the important countries where FAO sees that there is a need to make high emphasis of maintaining the biodiversity in the mountainous areas, because the impact created in Pakistan will have a long-lasting result, both for the people of Pakistan and generations to come, but also for the entire region and the entire world. As you all know, the 50% of the biodiversity hotspots and 30% of key biodiversity areas are specifically in the mountain areas. So that makes the importance of conserving the biodiversity, specifically in the mountain areas, even more important, because that is one of the sources where there is no other area in the planet where can provide us an opportunity to preserve the biodiversity of the species of the animals and plants, other than in the mountains. And that's why there is a significant role here in Pakistan, and that's why we are from FAO interested in supporting the government of Pakistan and the institutions in Pakistan to ensure that the biodiversity conservation actions in the country are placed on the adequate level. We know that the mountains as such are source of life for many, many millions and billions of people on Earth. We know that the 27% of the Earth's land surface is covered by mountains. In Pakistan, this number is even bigger, it's around 60%. And we know that the mountains are one of the important, most significant sources of fresh water. About 60 to 80% of the fresh water anywhere in the world comes specifically from the mountains. And again, in Pakistan here, we are not exception. Majority of our drinking water, the fresh water, comes from the mountain sources. And this is very important natural reserve given to us to the people by the Almighty that they are responsible for. And then we need to use it properly, but also conserve it for the future generations. The mountains are source of energy in many countries. And again, here in Pakistan, the significant amount of hydropower generated from the mountain rivers and streams cannot be neglected. This is one of the important sources of energy. And in many other countries, also wind power is generated quite in intensive volumes, specifically in the mountain areas. There's another side of the importance of the mountains that we have to highlight in every forum is the amount of food generated and produced specifically in the mountain areas. This quite often seems to be neglected in many sort of economical systems. The food systems are not sufficiently considering this factor, but there's a significant volume of food which derives specifically from the mountain areas. In terms of the population, statistics demonstrate that 15% of the world population lives specifically in mountain areas. And that is quite significant. There is still a large number of the people, despite all efforts of urbanization and migration of the population to the urban centers anywhere in the world, the significant number, like 15%, are still residing in the mountain areas. So that means we have a duty of care for a large number of people who reside on those areas. And then we need to make sure that these people residing there would have the sufficient living standards which would enable them to help conservation of the biodiversity in the areas of their residence. Because biodiversity conservation cannot be seen as an element in isolation. It has to be seen in a complex. Just like the previous speaker was mentioning, like the people who will be residing in those areas, in the mountain areas, how we can make them be interested and efficiently use the resources around them, but then make sure that the biodiversity is effectively conserved and then depletion of the resources is avoided. Unfortunately, this large number of the people living in the mountain areas live in poverty. We estimates from our organization, from FAO, shows that one out of two people in those areas are under the threat of food insecurity because they live in quite harsh climatic conditions, because normally the economic opportunities in those mountain areas anywhere in the world is quite limited, because we as human civilization are concentrating wealth and economic opportunities more in the industrial zones and in the more urbanized centers. Whereas the people who are living in the mountain areas, they continue living their traditional ways of life, but then in the current market economy, the economic side of their living standards are not, unfortunately, comparable to the opportunities provided in urban areas. So this is a significant issue that requires attention, and then we would like to use this opportunity of the International Mountain Day to highlight this issue. The mountains continue to be source of the several food commodities like honey, herbs, spices, but also handicrafts from those indigenous people living in the mountain areas who keep the traditions are important elements. Cosmetics sector benefit from some of the source produces from that only can be brought from the mountain areas. And also medicines, the medical science is also depending on the plants and materials which are only available and can be produced in the mountain areas. So that highlights another side of why conserving biodiversity in the mountain areas is so important. Here in Pakistan, we see another commodity, chalghuza pine, which is a high value commodity, which is a high value agriculture product. And the mountains of Pakistan are quite rich of this resource, but then the way this resource is to be managed does require importance and attention. From FAO side, we are running a project to help communities living in the mountain areas in several provinces, starting from Balochistan to KP and to Gilgit-Baltistan, help those communities which reside in mountain areas and have access to Chalruza pine trees and harvest them to make this their practice in a sustainable way. So we also help them to improve the value chain of their process so that they take maximum advantage of the harvested Chalruza pine seeds for the marketing, so they get maximum economic benefits. That is also helping to use modern technologies, more advanced technologies, so that the pine trees are preserved and conserved, so that the harvesting is done in an efficient way without damage to the trees themselves. Plus regeneration of the pine trees, so that the future generations would also have the opportunity to continue this, having access to this high value commodity. It is interesting to mention in this group that there are several very common commodities like maize, potato, barley, sorghum, tomatoes, and apples, which are very much used these days in the urban areas, which are pretty much part of daily life of the modern human civilization. But pretty much, probably people forgot that all these commodities specifically were originated from the mountain areas. So initially, we as human civilizations took this commodity from the mountain areas and then adopted it to the lower lands and then made them available now, which become part of our daily life. But these are the products which are gifts from the mountain areas, and this should not be forgotten. We see from FAO side that in the mountain areas, the family farming is an important mode of farming activity to promote, because in the mountain areas, the land is a scarce resource, and then the elevations are different, there are slopes, and then the farming areas cannot be done on the large scale or industrial machinized, using the machinized methods. So a lot of dependency is on manual labor and the diversity of the different small-scale crop production. But then the good thing is that this type of activity is a green and sustainable type of farming. It does not create much damage to the environment. It does not contribute much to the CO2 emissions, and it does preserve the soil fertility and helps to, again, to conserve the mountain biodiversity for the people who live in those areas. And then there's another important aspect which was also lightly touched upon in the previous presentation, that the beauty of the mountain areas and biodiversity, which is preserved in the mountain areas, are the most important elements that attract tourism for those particularly remote areas. And that is also quite unique here in the context of Pakistan, where the mountain tourism can be effectively promoted. And then by that, we need to make this work in conjunction with the preserving the biodiversity in the mountain areas, so that we take the benefit of the beauty of the area, benefit of farming the highly nutritious fish farming in the mountain areas, which will be in the complex, plus the lifestyle of the villagers, and then traditions in the villages, the handicrafts produced in the villages, which all in the complex can attract a good number of the tourists to visit those areas, which is the entire economic sector by itself. But it has to be done, organized in a responsible manner, so that this activity will bring economic benefit to the mountain areas. At the same time, it will help to conserve the biodiversity in the area, and it does not damage it. So from FAO side, we think there are 6 important actions that we all need to focus on. Like number 1 would be, we need to see how we can increase investment in research and data collection from the mountain areas related with biodiversity conservation. Because these days, without information, without sufficient data, making any decisions is very difficult, and then the quality of the decisions will not be as good. So therefore, increasing investment in the research and the information collection systematically will be important. Number two, we need to focus on enhancing local capacities to reduce biodiversity loss, because again, in all the parts of the world, we see that unfortunately the population living in the mountain areas have very low levels of income. That means their activities may go in jeopardizing and may damage the conservation efforts of the biodiversity. So to avoid that, we need to increase the capacities of the population living there, how they can effectively carry out their practices, but at the same time, those practices will be sustainable and then the biodiversity will be conserved. Number three would be informing policymakers to promote conservation actions and increase the resilience of mountain communities. As we know, including here in Pakistan, population living in the mountain areas are prone to much more devastating impacts of the natural risks and hazards, be it floods, be it snowfalls or landslides, etc. So from the policymaker side, it is important to make emphasis on increasing the resilience of the people living in those remote communities. Number four, engaging and advocating with conventions, networks, and movements. It is important that the entire groups like we are gathering here today would be created where people of different backgrounds would come together and work and think and work how we collectively can help people residing in the mountain areas and how we can systematically ensure that the mountain biodiversity is effectively used today and then preserved for the future generations. Number five, from FAO side, we believe that supporting sustainable agriculture in mountains to reserve agrobiodiversity losses is important. We need to make sure that all the farming activities practiced by the people in the mountain areas are not damaging agrobiodiversity and they are not bringing to the loss of the agrobiodiversity. Because unfortunately, over the generations with advanced technologies, we as human civilization are unfortunately responsible for the complete disappearance of some of the species of the animals and even some of the type of the plants. So we need to make sure that the practices we have today are not creating further damage to the existing biodiversity, especially in the mountain areas. Number six, last but not least, it is important to promote indigenous knowledge and its role in maintaining mountain biodiversity, agro ecosystems, and improving food security. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, unfortunately, the food insecurity among the population living in the mountain areas is quite significant. So that situation needs to be changed, and that requires collective efforts. That if that is not fixed, then these people living in the areas will be less responsible for the conservation of the mountain biodiversity, and then it will also is likely to provoke migration of the people from those areas to the urban locations. So this kind of lack of people in the mountain areas is also a problem by itself, because conservation of the biodiversity in some areas does also require presence of the human beings, like presence of the settlements of the population. And then by presence of the people and with the right type of activities, the conservation can be organized in a better way rather than leaving those areas and abandoning completely their villages. So therefore, we hope that the gatherings like today of the professionals of this group and then the policymakers, all of us coming together, will help us to better strategize how we can help the people residing in the mountain areas, so that we all together collectively develop plans for protecting the biodiversity in the mountain areas. Again, taking maximum advantage of it today for ourselves, but also making sure that we will leave sufficient diverse biodiversity in the mountain areas for our children and grandchildren and generations to come.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Farokh Torov, if I really pronounce your name in correctly, for your wonderful presentation. And definitely they are very thought-provoking ideas and perspectives that you have given. And definitely I believe the experts present here would take up these things and jointly, and we need to have integrated and inclusive biodiversity conservation strategies. And I believe FAO would definitely would like to pick it up the national strategy for biodiversity conservation for the at least for the mountain areas, if not other ecosystems, as like the coastal areas or the desert areas or the plains even. And even because FAO has a larger mandate, even it can go and plan a federal and provincial series of strategies, because a national strategy and with the provincial components, if you like to go ahead about. Thank you, wonderful, for your wonderful presentation. Now I have Mr. Ali Taqi Sheikh, the former Chief Executive Officer, Leadership for Environment and Development, and he is very well known water and climate change expert. Sir, Ali Taqi Sheikh Sahab, can I see you? जरा कैमरा ठीक करें आप, अपना कैमरा ठीक करें सर, इसको जरा सीधा करें, नहीं इसको सीधा करें, इसको, हाँ ये बिल्कुल ठीक है, now it's fine. And please go ahead, Ali Taqi Sheikh Sahab, how water and climate change and biodiversity can be improved.
Thank you very much.
And what is the state in Pakistan?
Thank you, Munir Saab. Thank you for this opportunity. We just had an excellent presentation from FAO and earlier from Ashik Saab. I just want to add 2 or 3 highlights and then focus on 1 or 2 points. There are several threats to our mountain areas and biodiversity in mountain areas. And I have, from the top of my head, want to highlight 5. First very big threat is the increasing population. Population is increasing at a very rapid rate. This results in a competition for space between other species and the nature. And we see that oftentimes that results in conflict between different uses of biodiversity and our ability to benefit from that. If human population begins to monopolize that, it will be at the cost of other species, and that is not the balance that we need to maintain. It is also reflected in agriculture in several ways. One is increased terracing in the mountain systems, which oftentimes results in losing the topsoil. Losing topsoil means losing your fertility and your prosperity and the nutrients that need to go into that are present in the soil. And we lose it to the reservoirs and dams, which means that we also reduce their lifespan. And we refuse, it all results in losing the depth of rivers downstream, which means increased flooding all the way to the Arabian Sea. It also results in introducing alien species for agriculture and livelihood options. And our colleague from FAO mentioned several, and many of those species and varieties were not traditionally grown in those areas. And now, because of increased population pressure and commodification of agriculture, we see that a lot of genetically modified varieties are being introduced in agriculture and in fruit and vegetables there, which are and resulting in increased pesticide use. And that poses threat to groundwater integrity and results in food intake. Growing economies such as CPEC also pose many, many new challenges to the local economy and fragile ecosystems. The rate of traffic expected only on one road is 1,000,000 times more. There are exact number of trucks available or containers available that will be trafficking every hour in the coming years. But the hum and vibration created here results not only in further degradation of the fragile ecosystem, but also in the movement and migration of species. I want to mention tourism. Our notion, or Mr. Imran Khan's notion of tourism, is mass tourism without necessarily having an infrastructure. Result is that we end up creating slums as we have created in Murray and Nathia Gully and several other places, instead of having a pristine ecotourism. And the history of tourism in Pakistan is very long and a very checkered one. We cannot blame any one particular political government for this, but the continuing this tradition of destroying the environment that we have means that we are not really fit for tourism at this point, particularly not the mass level tourism that is being promoted. Any prosperity that goes to Karachi or Hyderabad or in Punjab or other areas in plain areas results in direct deterioration of the mountain ecosystems in area. I want to focus now on 2 or 3 aspects which are specifically closer to my heart. The impact of climate change. Just as Ashfaq Ashik Saab mentioned, he's a very well regarded scientist. One cannot disagree with him, but he will agree with me, I think, that our approach has been very, very piecemeal. We have tried to protect specific species from increasing pressure in different parts of our mountain systems. Actually, where we have not focused is how to protect our ecosystems. If our ecosystems are habitable, if those are healthy systems, if those are the systems that provide sufficient space to different species to survive and live in harmony with the nature, then the prospects of winning this game become higher. But if we marginalize other species and keep on having an approach that focuses on a specific species rather than focusing on the ecosystem, then I think it's a battle which will be very hard to win. In specific climate change context, let me focus a little bit on Upper Indus Basin in particular, which has tremendous significance for the whole world, not any less for Pakistan, that depends more than 70% on its water from glacial melt. Increasing incidence of heat wave does not allow the fresh snow to become part of the glacier. It melts more quickly and sooner, which means that we begin to have water downstream in pre-monsoon areas. We already see that happening in Kabul River Basin, where increased heat waves in Afghanistan results in early melting, gives early water to Pakistan. And Pakistan at this stage is in those months, very short of water, and it's a blessing in disguise that we get this water. Because when we don't have water, it's an interprovincial conflict. Sindhi complaint would often be that Punjab is not giving us the water. But when the early water comes, then the bigger farmers in the 4 districts bordering Punjab grow water-intensive rice varieties. So they become the economic beneficiaries of early water, whereas the downstreams in the districts in Sindh do not benefit from that early water. But if early water starts emerging from Hindu Kush, Himalayan regions as well, with more frequency and in greater quantity, that would essentially mean that cropping pattern downstream will change. This will also mean very strong economic impact on the agriculture patterns and incomes of people. Related to this are the GLOFs. Oftentimes people speak about them. There are hundreds, possibly thousands, and they are resulting in different kinds of damages. One, of course, is the damage in the shape of floods that hurts the communities and their livelihoods and people living there. It also hurts people downstream as well. But very importantly, what we do not always recognize, that the people who had lived there for centuries are becoming nomadic people. As they can hear the ice cracking, they know that the outburst is about to happen. They move back and forth to protect themselves and their livestock. And that nomadic pattern is almost as important as their outward migration to other parts of the country or other cities or urban areas. So the local level migration that is happening is a very, very profound socioeconomic impact of the climatic patterns. What we do not always recognize, that the monsoon is, third point, monsoon is changing its pattern, and change in monsoon pattern means not only having early or late monsoon in the typically monsoon areas, it also means that the monsoon has started visiting upper reaches of the Indus, in upper Indus Basin, in some areas which were not traditionally monsoon areas. And rainwater is a warmer water. It results in faster, quicker, and much larger melting and receding of glaciers. So now rainfalls that have started visiting in non-monsoon areas in the upper reaches results in more water downstream, which in the short term may be excellent, but in long term we are losing a very big reserve that we have. And then it also results in, it ensues different kind of changes, including agriculture. So the climatic changes that are happening is not just the monsoon that has started visiting non-monsoon area. Please also remember, and this is my fourth and the last point regarding climate change, the winters are becoming shorter, and therefore the snow period is becoming shorter. And not just that, there are shorter winters as well as shorter snow period. So we are getting less snowfall in those areas than we used to have in earlier decades. In other words, the process of formation of glaciers is also slowing down, and in some cases, in some seasons, reversing. I want to stop here. These are very, very important points that I wanted to share with my colleagues. And in fact, I've tried to build upon what my colleague Farooq from FAO and Ashik Sahab had said. I just want to highlight one point, because there's a very important UNDP GCF supported project dealing with these areas. And recently, maybe in yesterday's papers, all of us saw a huge, big advertisement of that project. I don't know how many community people will read that, but what is important for us to see if there can be citizens' guides for those people, how they can adjust and attenuate to new threats that are emerging to them. With a similar kind of budget that we have for such advertisements, which is very important in many, many ways, because we do want to increase the consciousness of other decision makers and policy makers. But I think some investments in agriculture, in livelihoods, in new species, such as kind of thing that FAO just mentioned, I think begs for citizens' guides as well as case studies of knowledge for us to build on. Thank you very much, Manish Saab.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ali Tawqir Sheikh Saab, for your wonderful presentation. And definitely the money is used for such kind of supplements that really have no meaningful knowledge sharing. I think the money should be invested into such kind of knowledge products that could communicate much more efficiently the effects of climate change and biodiversity issues in the mountains to the local communities. And before I proceed to Rab Nawaz Saab, Senior Director, Biodiversity, WWF Pakistan, I would request everyone if they have some question to the participants, to the panelists, they can always ask. For example, if you have some question to ask to Ali Taqir Sheikh Saab about it. Yeah, the first question from Ashik Ahmed Khan Saab. Ashik Ahmed Khan Saab, please go ahead.
Thank you. I congratulate Ali Taqir Sheikh for a very nice presentation. It's very good. I just want to aid a bit in that the local community in all those areas, especially in the northern mountains, they are very well aware of the climate change. And I had conducted a survey about 8 years ago, and you'll be surprised to know that they had a very clear idea, like how many days the summer have got increased and the winters are shortened, and they said this is 10 to 12 days, and that was the answer that was given by almost 8 people in 8 villages in the Gojal area. And same was the case in Swat, and same was there in Balochistan. So this, if you take the mountainous tract and see that how do people feel about it, that's something which I would like to mention. Then the second thing, that the people in all these areas, they have a lot of knowledge which we call indigenous knowledge. And so far, we didn't use their indigenous knowledge. We try to impose scientific knowledge upon them, but the best thing would be to combine the indigenous knowledge with the scientific knowledge, and then go ahead with that. And then the third thing, that there are several components in the local culture they would really be useful in conservation. So the best thing would be to utilize these also. Only that much. And then there is a brief comment on the Chalgoza thing, which my friend stated earlier. I would briefly mention that WWF had long been there in the Chalgoza forest area, and the latest development on that is that now the Balochistan government as well as the KP government, they both are really active to have the entire Chalgoza forest ecosystem as a protected area, and maybe they can come with a community biosphere reserve, because that's a community owned area, and the government has no big stake in that, but government can facilitate the process. And we will soon be having a meeting on that. So perhaps that may be a good news for the FAO who are working there, but WWF has been working there for almost 15 years in that area. Thank you very much.
Okay. Dr. Zagam Saiba. Please unmute your mic. Dr. Zagam Saiba, unmute your mic, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. I can also. So my question is actually about the mapping of biodiversity and the mountainous resources. I think when we talk about strategy, I yesterday attended also an international webinar on it. Our mountains are actually, and also our other areas are very rich in bio variation and diversity, and we don't have real knowledge of that. So my question is, if we have a basic map or basic landscape of biodiversity in different mountainous areas, including the other resources, including demographic pattern, that will be very helpful to develop the strategies, how to develop, because I think very good points by Sheikh Saab also, because some of the areas are very different from others. So this is my question, because I don't know much about that. Maybe we already have.
Whom this question is
I think आपने
जी अली तौकीर शेख साहब
जी मेरे ख्याल में ज़ैगम डॉक्टर साहब अस्सलाम वालेकुम
वालेकुम सलाम या वालेकुम सलाम तौकीर साहब
Hear us? Can you hear us?
जी,
Yeah,
please
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah,
आप
sounds
अपना
good.
कैमरा ऑन कीजिए and welcome to this seminar and please join it more frequently.
I tried to
I
on it
think you
and
have
I
raised
was.
excellent questions. You
Yeah,
have
okay,
raised
just continue.
excellent questions,
I
and
can.
I think they merit they merit full-fledged discussion, a separate discussion.
Okay.
Like IUCN's Red Book, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There need to be a timeline series of data made available to us about the mountainous areas. And this does not need to restrict because oftentimes the species do not respect the political or geographical bodies. There's a continuity of the mountainous regions. But there's a space for a separate database series over a period of time so that we have the baseline and as you travel through the century, in next 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, our next generation of scientists has better data available. Another connected point, and this can be added as an annexure by IUCN to its red list if there are not sufficient resources available. And this can be a request made by Government of Pakistan to EC mode, and all countries in the Hindu Kush Himalayan regions are members of EC mode. It's an intergovernmental body. It can be a request to them, and then they can find resources to undertake this scientific exercise in which people like you could also participate.
Okay.
And finally, what I want to add in this regard, there is urgent need for us to have more systematic subzoning mapping as well as demographic mapping of the population and human settlements. These are some of the urgent issues that need to be addressed for us to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sheikh Saab. Now I'll move forward. Rab Nawaz Saab is the Senior Director Biodiversity WWF Pakistan, and he will be speaking about biodiversity conservation efforts and challenges that we are facing now. Rab Nawaz Saab, please go ahead.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation. I won't speak too long because I think a lot has been covered, but it's good we focus on the biodiversity. So I think that we have some success stories and some as Ashik Sapa said, gaps. I wouldn't like to say failures. And I think Pakistan has actually pioneered some of these, albeit they've been controversial. But I'd like to take it back to the 80s in both in Balochistan and in GB and KP when the markhor, the national animal of Pakistan, was on the verge of extinction. And I think it was a partnership approach which has always proved successful of AKLSP, ISCN, WWF, and other smaller organizations to bring trophy hunting into the country. And I think what made it a success, and I think we love to claim successes, but basically it was individuals and champions such as Malik Mumtaz, such as Sardar Tareen, and those who've been around. Ashik Sab will recognize the name of Shakil Darani, who is an, I think, governor of GB. And bringing a very new way of looking at mountain species, markhor, ibex, urial, and introduce a trophy hunting scheme. I think it's been a success because it was a win-win for everyone, win-win for the animal, or for the population, not the animal, and the communities and the government, because they also got a way of sustainably running a program. And I think this is a big success. And if you see places like Chitral Gold National Park, who've benefited from it, though obviously hunting hasn't gone on in the park, but it's gone in the surrounding areas. So if you look at Tushi Game Reserve, where just this morning I got photographs of a markhor, just, you can really reach out and touch the markhor and easily see it, and access to wildlife and look at it and observe it as you would in a big African game reserve. Now that's a good success, but some people have said that the scheme is outdated. Um, Countries are closing their borders to trophy hunted animals, so US, UK, and so maybe it's a time for us to move on, and we look at the revise the way we work with communities. And as Ashik Saab rightly said, they've really come a long way as well. Education has become slowly accessible to these mountain communities. They're much more aware. They're much more vocal. They're much more. They have better access to the outside world. And I think people have talked about the last 2 days as I've been on these calls about tourism. And they said ecotourism has been thrown around. And I don't believe really in ecotourism. It either has to be sustainable or it has to be responsible. Ideally, you want both. But I think we now have areas that are, places where we can take tourists. We've recently been approached by a Japanese tour group who only want to come for wildlife. And we do have some of the most unique species, unique cultures in the mountains. And now is the time to take up the government's initiative. I mean, I appreciate the initiative the government's taken on the ecotourism, but we need to plan this well. If we are going to conserve these very fragile and very unique habitats and species and communities, then we have to come together and support the government and make sure that whatever we do in the name of tourism, ecotourism, sustainable tourism, is well planned. And we're very famous for running ahead, putting the cart before the horse. And then after 10 years, we have places like Naran, Sifamalook, which are ecological disasters. I can't see many of these villages. They were villages. Naran was a village. When I first visited, I think in 95, 96, there was 2 hotels, and that was it. It was a beautiful, rustic experience. You stayed in a very shabby hotel, and you got into a jeep. You went up to that time. You couldn't actually get into Sefmaluk. You can drive right up. You had to walk some way, but the experience actually brought you close to nature. Now that is changing. The ecosystem has changed. The hydrology has changed. The water quality has changed, and even the air quality in Iran. If we're going to save our mountain ecology, then we need to act fast, because these are ecosystems that once they're gone, they take thousands of years, if not longer, to recuperate. So, so my message, I think, is 2 things. One is we really need to work together to make sure we don't make new neurons. There's new neurons in the underway. Nalta Valley is just one. I think there's 2 things we need to do. One is to really, and I think someone talked about this earlier, or perhaps I heard it this morning on a talk show. We really need to invest into our researchers and our students and our universities. We don't have good wildlife people. We don't have good students. We have good students. We don't have students with a background in ecology, ornithology, entomology. It's a very kind of we don't have those students coming into the profession, because as you know, we do have some of the great gurus. Somebody's on the call, Ashik Saab. But there needs to be a second in command to take this forward. So I think establishing maybe a center for excellence in mountain biodiversity or mountain ecology is something we've been thinking of in GB. Karachi International University is Karakoram International University is willing to take this on. We need to build this good, robust, science-based evidence so we can manage our resources. So I think I'll stop there. And as I said, a lot of great things have been said already, and I'm open to questions. Thank you, Minister, for the invitation.
Okay. Thank you, Rab Nawaz Sahab, for highlighting some very important issues. And definitely, as Ashik Saab also said, and some other experts also, that we need to invest into research and to develop like a biodiversity center of excellence as well. And before moving forward, I would like to request all the panelists and the participants present to, switch on your videos so that we could have a screenshot for our report. Rabnawaz sir, thank you, thank you. Muzaffar Saab, Kiran Afzal Saiba, Zagam Saiba, Asima, please. AIMS conference, I can't see your face. You are not, your camera is not right, not in the right position. Zagam Saiba, please, zara camera set karne so that, Ali Tokir Sheikh Saab, आप कैमरे से बाहर हैं, फ्रेम से बाहर हैं. Yes, that's great. That's great. Sima, can you switch on your video? Okay, fine. I don't know if she is around. Rabnawaz साहब आप फ्रेम से बाहर जा रहे हैं. Chin down, please. आपका कैमरा बहुत नीचे है. Sorry. Yes. AIMS, आपकी आवाज, आपकी जो फोटो है वो जरा, you are out. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah. Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Let's go. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. One more? Yes, we need one more. Please switch on your videos. Kiran Afzal Saiba, Seema. Yeah. This documentation is very important, you know. Thank you very much. Now I would like to request Kiran Afzal Saiba. She is Senior Technical Advisor on tourism sector of, she works for World Bank. Kiran Afzal Saiba, please would you share your experiences of working in the tourism sector and how it is sustainable, and if it is contributing to loss of biodiversity or improving the ecosystems and biodiversity as well, because tourism has happened to be one of the contributor to the loss of biodiversity in our mountain areas, as we have witnessed over the years. Kiran Afzal Saiba, please go ahead. Kiran Afzal Saiba. Kiran Afzal Saiba, I can't hear you.
Her mic is off.
माइक तो ठीक है उनका. किरण अफजल साहबा, आपका माइक जरा अपना चेक करें. हमारी तरफ से तो ठीक है. क्या है? किरण अफजल साहबा, I can't hear you. One thing, if you're hearing me, like you can do one thing, you can exit and come back to the meeting again, if it is not working.
अब बताइए, is it better?
Yeah, अभी ही तो ठीक
Okay,
है.
sorry about that.
It's better. No problem at
Okay,
all.
so-
Please go ahead.
Yeah, we use a few applications these days for digital sessions, so we have to adjust every time. So my
Okay.
apologies to everyone.
No problem
And
at all.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me. I think I don't have a lot to add to what our distinguished panelists have already said. There are a few humble submissions. One is that we as World Bank are taking a very dynamic or robust lens to look through the projects that we are launching or that we are implementing already across the country. And Green Initiative or Green Pakistan Initiative of the Prime Minister is very central to that. And that covers the biodiversity and national parks aspects of mountain tourism. because those are, of course, habitats for wildlife, and those also house a lot of our aquaculture. And so we have, fisheries, and we have also other species thriving and unique forests. Somebody mentioned pine nuts also. So all of that, and even walnuts, there's plenty in Kagan Valley. So all of that, in some ways is unexplored, in other ways it's been exploited already. So through the project, which is KP Integrated Tourism Project, with the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Prime Minister yesterday, in fact, launched a responsible tourism initiative. You might have seen the coverage in the press. It was done here in Islamabad. So the idea behind that initiative is to not let any promotion or development of tourism damage the local habitats. And the other theme around that is the local communities should be involved in the responsible tourism initiative, so that they take the ownership, they help to preserve their localities. Forest cutting is then, looked down upon by the communities, and then they are also going to reap the benefits through the tourism receipts which are coming in from the visitors going to those areas. And you know very well that in Europe, a lot of the tourism, Europe especially, and in parts of the US, a lot of the tourism is attracted because of the national parks, which they have maintained so well, and they create so many jobs for the locals, and provide opportunities to even showcase what these countries or regions have to offer. So I think in case of Pakistan, whatever work has been done or documented, it is now time to implement. A lot of studies have been done on waste management, on conserving the biodiversity, but it's time to now take those forward. There is no dearth of financing for or resources, but they need to be diverted appropriately. And the important thing is that the private sector needs to take the ownership also, not just the communities, because the government and communities alone cannot implement these solutions sustainably. The local enterprises, the hotels associations in mountainous areas, the tour guides, and also the guides which or the agencies which provide licenses for mountaineering, they should be trained to provide this or transfer this knowledge to tourists or climbers going to the mountain areas, in order to discourage in order to discourage littering or trashing, or even crowding of mountainous spots. So like I said, with the help of government of KP, we are going to be taking a few initiatives. One of those was launched yesterday by the name of Track. It also involves Nestle Pakistan, and going forward, we hope to involve more fast moving consumer good companies through their corporate social responsibility initiatives. And I think if we talk of responsible or sustainable tourism, for Pakistan, mountain tourism is going to play a big part in that. And I think the National Coordination Committee on Tourism is already aware of these issues, but it may not be a bad idea for you to compile this report from today's webinar and present it to Pakistan Tourism Development Corporation, because they are the secretariat to the National Coordination Committee. So I'll stop there. If you have any specific questions regarding our support, just let me know, but I'm keen to hearing from other panelists. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Saba, thank you very much. I have a question before, like anyone else asked you. I have been part of a project in Naran area for the promotion of tourism, and USAID funded several hotels over there. But the trainings were conducted for hospitality and tourism management and financial management, but the project never conceived any solid waste management or sewage management of the hotels. If like whatever interventions you are planning in different areas, Do you have that in consideration, Kiran Afzal Sahaba?
Gee, that's a good question. So two things have happened during the time we started implementing the KITE project, or KP Integrated Tourism Development Project, that the board of the Kagan Development Authority was sort of reconstituted. They have now a chairman who is Dr. Emil Zaman, and he has reconstituted and included new members in the board for the Development Authority to give it more capacity. We have been talking to him, and with the help of the actually tourism department of KP, we have now put together the activity on designing of sanitary landfill sites, and not just in Naran, but also in Galyat area, because that seems to be the only viable and long-term option right now for disposing or treating the waste. And very soon you will see the expression of interest launched in the newspapers, inviting the firms to submit their proposals, so that the process for the feasibility and design of these sanitary landfill sites can begin. But I agree with you that when we went into these areas and started doing stock taking, we realized that the planning for sewerage and waste collection and minimization or even recycling was completely missing. So the recycling aspect is going to be handled by Nestle Pakistan now in these areas, especially Naran and Galiyat. This is what yesterday's event was a little bit about. And then but that is, I would think, almost short term. We need permanent solutions for these areas, and this is why the project will also sponsor the development of sanitary landfill site once the feasibility is ready. We'll have to be a little patient because we are looking at a situation where planning was never done. Although the local, as you rightly said, they have the solutions and they know how to go about it, but it has to be done in an organized fashion. So this is very much on our cards.
Okay, thank you. Any further question to Kiran Afzal Sahaba? Any panelists, any participant like to ask about sustainable tourism, responsible tourism? I don't see any hand. Thank you so much, Kiran Afzal Sahaba. Please stay with us. Afterwards, someone may have any further question to ask you.
Sure.
Now,
Sure.
as we have been talking about mountain communities to be engaged into tourism, we have Muzaffaruddin Saab, former general manager, AKRSP, and he has been putting up different initiatives engaging communities. And I would like to see how communities has played role in biodiversity conservation and promotion of responsible tourism. Muzaffaruddin Sahab, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I think thanks for organizing this Mountain Day discussion. And Munir Saab, I think you have been for a long time champion and committed. So we all mountain communities are really thankful to you, because every year you bring mountain into limelight with your very personal effort. Maybe you some of may know me. My name is Muzaffar, and I am from a very remote village, or living in a very highest mountain area called Shimshal, which has so much hotspots of biodiversity, and remain in the center of many biodiversity related issues, challenges, opportunities. Currently, I am in the area, and it's snowing outside. It's beautiful, but it is also creating difficulties for all of us. What mountain is? I think I will be here talking about three very short points. One is, the people and mountain or communities. I personally, being, in my childhood, I was a shepherd, in the mountain in our area, women's usually go in summer pasture. So this biodiversity is actually was, and at this time also is part of our livelihood. What I remember until 80s, hunting was part of our very important livelihood source. Every household would have one person who was hunting, and they will go and bring this hunt animals and make part of this was part of our daily life. And similar was the produces wild vegetables, and of course as a we live, most of the mountain community live a more of a agro-pastoralist life, and you all, some of them are the most amazing, who have spent quite substantial time in this area, like Ashok Saab. So this is one very important things first to understand, that people living in the mountain are part of the all ecosystem, and whatever changes either internally, externally happens, definitely impact all of them together, not one species or one area, which I think is very important at this point to know. And with the, which I witness in my, this lifetime or working with organization, that many interventions when happens, particularly when road comes, private sector initiatives were there, government initiatives were there, with their own lenses or with own departmental, kind of focuses. So many, I think, rather became complicated than solution comes in. For instance, as I will tell you that, like, what happened was, when national park was established in our part, like Hunjarab National Park, a discriminative hunting started from all sectors, including communities, all the government officials, private people. They will all come, and because we have a very weak governance structure, so they just discriminately hunted and just kind of wiped out the animals from Hunjarab National Park. So though it was an intervention to protect it, but because it was very departmental or compartmental initiative, so those who were not part of this created a major issue. And similarly is with the climate change. So these were the initial problems, which for some reasons we all didn't understand it. But thanks that there was this community-based initiatives, particularly some individuals and some institutions really made a substantial effort. One is, of course, AKRSP, who helped around organized community to think collectively, which was, I think, the core of these all changes, that how we can collectively think and collectively benefit. And there were some individuals like Ashok Saab, who spent a very substantial time with the communities to make understand how we can link the biodiversity with the communities' current changing need and government and the international organizations' priorities. So we had also some very good results, which we all feel proud, because the good part was that this initiative, this community-based conservation initiative, was not owned spearhead by government officials, by communities, by international organizations like WWF, IUCN, AKDN organization, and many other experts. So we have now a very good kind of model, a grassroots level model, that how we can move forward. What is and I will tell you, as a community development student, and also being the community of this area, member of this area, I think there are some very good forward-looking thinking in community that how we will move forward. What is, in coming 10, 15, 20, even 25 years, in my village, they have developed a 25-year vision plan before, and now they are developing another 50-year vision plan. So these are some very interesting thinking that how community is thinking, for future. I think that one of the few challenges which I will highlight here, which we all need to think on that. One is this, currently I'm sorry to say this notion of national park, which fortunately or unfortunately, our current government announced it that we will be making more national park. Just maybe you all know that this national park model is a colonial model, and it is everybody knows. And very interestingly, our communities are very well aware of. They have been to, with the support of international organization, to these African national parks, which has been developed, just to control things. And the bottom line is, unfortunately, this market economy. So I think we have to think on this thing that we have already developed in Pakistan, and many international countries are looking to that model of community-based, more of a landscape model, biodiversity management. But we still are in the government quarters. We are still thinking of this very old and I will say rusted national park model, which has a very strong colonial controlled and all sort of models. So I think this need to be very with all these very high-profile people in this forum. I think this need to be discussed. And what you all have put your efforts and developed this community-based, sustainable and futuristic thinking and holistic thinking need to be brought into the governance or government quarters. The second area is, I think you all have mentioned, which I think in northern Pakistan, it is, though happening at a civil society level, is a more comprehensive or, comprehensive effort rather than, we have this compartmental views. I think one good example is the AKDN approach here. Like they have a cultural model, they have education, health, and they have now nature habitat, community model. So I think for this purpose, we need to have also this type of somewhere at policy level, that national level to think on that. The other very important thing, which is becoming a new challenge, and unfortunately we have no solution for that, is mining. Because now we can see, particularly in Gilgit-Baltistan, many, these international organizations are coming for mass level, minings, which I think is becoming the most disastrous issue. And communities are at their level trying to, lobby, but I think this is one major thing which we need, because this is becoming a major challenge in the future, that because of CPAC, I think mining will be one major resource exploitation or exploration will be one major focus of the corporate sectors or their interest along the CPAC. And I think this is one very important area. The last one, which I think some of you have at some level mentioned, is that because gradually in northern Pakistan, or the people who live in the mountain, they are providing a very important environmental services to downstream people. Like we all, and it's at cost. because we have these all conservation areas, we will be having limited resource utilizations. So I think there should be some level of a environmental service from the downstream communities and downstream, government should have policies that people in the mountain need to be subsidized for these environmental services. So either what will happen is two things are happening. One is that people are leaving their areas. For example, my village, when we have this national park issue, people felt very bad and they thought, why we should live here? Because if we are not allowed to do our daily work here. So there are a gradual, not gradual, but very big pressure on the small cities like Gilgit. Currently, Gilgit population, just today, Gilgit population, a small city population, is more than the population of 3 districts of Gilgit-Baltistan, 3 districts. So can you imagine this urbanization happening in mountain area will be a disastrous thing. So how we can create a system that people in the mountain are supported, so they should stay there, because if people leave the area become deserted, and we have seen it in our areas. The areas which we have left, and these areas are now desert, particularly in Shimshal. If you can see, the areas where our community have left, and this area became deserted, and even wildlife animals have left because there is no greenery, vegetation, all sort of activities there. So these are some of my points, and at last I will say that communities, particularly in Gilgit-Baltistan and the area I came from, Hunza, people are very much aware, committed, and they see a real future in conserving biodiversity. And I think if they receive some good support, I think we can create another level of model for not for Pakistan but for other areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Muzaffaruddin Saab, for your wonderful presentation. Ashik Saab has some comment or question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, let me congratulate Muzaffar Saab for all this. He's a very old friend. We know each other since early 90s, and he has been a driving force behind the community to be motivated and be concerned about the conservation. So that's another thing I would like to congratulate him for. Some of the things he said, perhaps I totally agree with that. Number one is the question of national park. This is something which I'm advocating also these days. Like a national park is hard to really be maintained in that status which is a colonial thinking. At the moment, if you motivate community somehow and just tell them not to overexploit and not to misuse the resources, perhaps that is enough in our context. We are poor people. We have a big dependency on these things. So if we have any initiative that motivate people to conserve the nature, that motivate people to go for sustainable uses, and that encourages scientific research, I think that's all. Biosphere reserve is a concept that is much more useful than a national park thing. It's a flexible category, and I think that accommodate that all those things which Muzaffar is doing in Shamshal, or all Shamshali's friends are doing there in Shamshal. Uh, so I think that they may go for any kind of nomenclature, provided they protect the resources. That's number one. Then environmental services and any fee on that, I again agree with that. We know that these people, not only in Shamshal, but in almost all remote villages of Upper Hunza, also in places like Naltar, also in places like Upper Chatral, we need to have a system whereby people are motivated to stay at home, shouldn't leave their homes. And this is not difficult. Many people are doing it. So perhaps a better strategy will be needed to do that. And mining, again, I'm with Muzaffar. I won't like mining to be done in national park without any concrete control. Uh, if it is uncontrolled, this is simply disastrous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashik Kamal Khan Sahab, for your comments on the observations made by Muzaffaruddin Sahab. Muzaffaruddin Sahab, may I ask before I would, I see Imran Khalid Sahab is also present here, our next speaker. Muzaffaruddin Sahab, very briefly, I would like to ask you that in the recent years after EVK to CNR had tourism promotion activities in downstream to market mountain areas and those tourist attractions. Pressure has been very immense on the natural resources and in the mountain areas, especially Gilgit-Baltistan. So what do you think, like, what is your observation after the tourism pressure, like tourism influx to the Gilgit-Baltistan? What sort of pressure you are feeling on the biodiversity and natural resources, and if it is responsible or irresponsible tourism that you are facing these days?
Thank you very much. I think it's one very important point, because we human are at the center of all these making or breaking. And the tourism is, I think, a great, I will say, opportunity for these mountain communities to stay on, because that brings a stream of income for them. I will, because when I was in AKRSP, so we did a very close kind of documentation of our, because this mass tourism start in very recently, just maybe 4th year of mass tourism coming, particular community, coming from Pakistan, the national tourism. What we have, the good things we have learned is that when communities take initiatives, communities are much aware. We have documented and saw that the people, initially came to northern Pakistan from south, were having quite disastrous impact, because throwing trashes or wall chalking or whatever, loud voices and all sort of things. So this was there very interestingly. But if we see last year data, we have found that many people from south, these tourists, have joined the local people to how to better manage the environment, or contribute toward environmental management. So I think it's a very good trend, and we should not blame each other. I think it is all of education. I will suggest, that still requires some level of investment, like Devcom Sahib rightly pointed out. We have to invest on responsible tourism, and the best way is if you invest on local communities, that if they take responsibility. I think this create more immediate impact and long-term impact also. Then if we make big slogans or signboard etc. For instance, we have initiated a small in Upper Hunza in Gojal, in one union council, this solid waste management model. You see in Hunza, Kado has a community-based solid waste management, and it was working very well. Now we manage community-based solid waste management with the support of some of our diplomatic friends. And when communities start using it, many of the, I saw many of our tourists came and contributed. They said, we want to contribute to this initiative because this is such an amazing initiative. So my just understanding or view is that if we work together, I think we can create this mass tourism a problem rather than an education model, that people when visit northern Pakistan, they go back and then they can say, there are some good things happening in northern Pakistan, why we can do in another part of Pakistan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now I would request Dr. Imran Khalid Sahab. Dr. Imran Khalid Sahab, yeah, thank you. You have अपना mic जरा unmute कर लें आप, please. Yeah, can I hear you?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Walaikum salam, Dr. Imran Khalid Sahab. Thank you very much. You have, had like a different presentation, different thoughts from different panelists. So, what do you think? Like, how do you see the conservation strategies in the context of climate impact as well, and how like tourism, like if like the tourism pressure or tourism influx would be damaging the mountain biodiversity?
Yes, thank you, Manish. I've been listening very closely to everything that the participants have said, and it's definitely been a very informative session, and I've been taking some notes, and perhaps I'll be repeating a few things, but I'll go through this. The point about national parks as a researcher is definitely interesting. I have a slightly different view, but I think that the point is valid in terms of how we approach the issue and how we take the communities along. But let me start by quoting the ecologist and biologist E.O. Wilson, who said that the one process now going on that will take millions of years to correct is the loss of genetic and species diversity by the destruction of natural habitats. This is the folly our descendants are least likely to forgive us. As the world's population grows, as Pakistan's population grows, and we hope that sustainability will be at the forefront of our mission and our vision. But if it is not, and if we fail on that front, it is our children that are going to be most affected, and that's what we really need to account for. So just going back to the larger theme of the discussion today, I'm going to hit upon 3 areas and then come back and highlight the way forward, and I'll also talk about tourism in that. So one thing that we really need to do is to talk about the quality of life of the people who are living in the mountains, right? So we've been talking about the species, and that's important, and I'll touch upon that as well. But the quality of life of the people living in these areas should be first and foremost, because that is going to be the starting point. By making significant progress in ensuring that the healthy natural systems sustain and support a high quality of life for people in the mountain areas will ensure that the other goals that we have are met. So this would mean ensuring and increasing the access to nature vis-a-vis cultural and spiritual enrichment and recreation. And this is obviously in line with what's happening with what we want to do with tourism, not what's happening right now. Not only so, what we want is that not only are the people of these areas being facilitated in this regard, but also people who are visiting these areas. Because if you've been to northern areas, and if you've sat there and looked around or spent a night there and looked at the night sky, you'll understand what kind of a connection a person develops with nature and the universe. Pakistan is facing a number of key issues. Climate change has been discussed. There are consequences for clean air as well. If we talk about CPEC, as Sheikh Saab was mentioning, there's going to be a transport corridor that's going to be built there. So addressing the carbon emissions that are happening, that's going to be key, not only at the point of source, but also in terms of how the forests and the natural resources are able to adapt to this. Provision of clean drinking water to the communities is going to be key. We know there are micro-hydel projects there, so energy is going to be key, and how we bring that about. flood control remains important, especially when we talk in the context of glacial lake outburst floods. Soil stability and productivity is key. And so all of these things are not only ecologically important, but also they're also important for the well-being of the people. When we come to the species diversity, there are three key points that I want to make. One is that we need to have a baseline assessment of where we stand. We've talked about data, and this is important, but the starting point could be to understand the whole scenario by having baseline assessments done. We could do it by through the help of organizations such as IUC and WWF, even who are working there. And that will ensure that we understand what kind of plants are there, what kind of animals are living there. And that's going to be key when we talk about going forward. We need to improve the health of the population and the species that are currently at risk. And that can be only done if we understand where we stand. And then we also have to ensure that the native species are doing fine, they're not being affected. This is something that will get perhaps affected as trade between China and Pakistan grows, as tourism grows, and there's a threat of invasive species. Ecosystem, Sheikh Saab brought it in, and rightly so. We can't think about the mountains without talking about ecosystems. Here water's been mentioned. We've talked about the watersheds. This is going to be key. You talk about tourism. So tourism, nowadays we're talking about refusing, reducing, repurposing, and then recycling. This is the thing that needs to happen, not only in northern areas, but across Pakistan if we want to address our growing waste management problems. And there is a definite role for corporations here and the private sector. But in my mind, if we are to resolve the waste management issue in the mountainous areas, it will have to be resolved at the point of origin. That means if a certain product is being developed in Lahore and then being transported up to the mountains areas, so then it's here in Lahore or in Karachi or in Islamabad or in the plains, wherever it is being developed, that's where it's going to be addressed. Because here I'm talking about the packaging, right? Unless and until we force the corporations to talk about the products that they're developing and address the waste management system at the source, we won't do it. So plastic containers should be done away with. If glass bottles are to be developed and then they can be easily recycled, they're easily picked up, and that needs to be done. So we really need to move away from this concept of landfills. Landfills are important. Landfills are needed in Pakistan. There are no sanitary landfills. There are no technical landfills because they require liners. But landfills at the very end of the day get filled up, and they require space. And we don't have that much space, especially in the mountain area. So here, reducing the amount of waste that's being generated will be key. So how do we move forward in this regard? So there's a definite need to recognize efforts and maximize coordination between the government, the communities, the private sector, think tanks, like the one I work for, academia. Everybody has to play their own role and participate in such decision making in this regard. Focus on ecosystems again and again, that's going to be key. So when we talk about national parks, we need to understand that they're part of an ecosystem and humans are part of that ecosystem too. We need to focus on using research, conducting research and using research for policy making. That would require sound scientific analysis. And Rab Nawaz Saab rightly mentioned that we don't have the capacity for that. We really need to enhance that. And once we have that, we'll need to involve the citizens, because the people who are living in these areas know about the region and the mountains a lot better than we do. And they'll have a role whereby citizen science will be important in analyzing this. This will also help foster local decision making. Finally, last couple of points, working cross-political boundaries. So not only at the local level, between the various districts and between the mountainous areas, northern Pakistan and the federal government, but also at the transboundary level. What can we learn from Nepal, for example? What can we learn from India? What can we learn from what's happening in Afghanistan? So there are good case studies around. What can we learn from China? And that needs to be brought in. There are a number of tools at our disposal in order to address the environmental and climate change related hazards. They include environmental impact assessments. They include strategic environmental assessments, but they're not being utilized. So the laws that the government currently has at its disposal are not being utilized. We never did a strategic environmental assessment of China-Pakistan economic corridor. We haven't done environmental impact assessments of the highways that are passing through GB. And we can still do that and we can still learn from that. But unless and until we start to utilize the low-hanging fruits that are available to us in terms of addressing these challenges, we'll still be at the same place 5 years from now. And I think that is the tragedy that we are facing, because we haven't done the things that were necessary to ensure that the well-being of the northern areas of our mountains remains the way it was perhaps 20 years back. There's been a total degradation on a number of fronts. So, but I'm hopeful that forums such as this can help us move forward in this regard. So thank you for having me give my views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Imran Khalisab, for your presentation. Definitely, you have highlighted certain areas where we need to have more consolidated interventions to safeguard biodiversity hotspots, and you have highlighted several challenges as well. I would like to go back to Farrukh Toirov with a question. Are you there, Mr. Toirov? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Pakistan's mountain areas, they have like wonderful horticulture products, but they lack sorting them out and packaging and transporting and marketing. Since FAO's mandate and scope is to empower communities and develop such kind of systems where mountain communities could harness on their natural resources, products. Do you have certain plans for Gilgit-Baltistan and KP and other like to make their products more marketable and to make or to link mountain communities to different markets in Pakistan and other countries?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is an excellent question. In fact, this is applicable to every sector and subsector of the agriculture. Even in our organization, for many years, we were focusing a lot on production side of the agricultural. We thought that if we help farmers to produce better quality products, then they can generate better income. But that's not always that straightforward, unless if you use a value chain approach which will target the entire cycle of the product, from production to harvesting, packaging, storage, transportation, marketing, and then until last consumption. So if there are weaknesses in this value chain, then the production, the produce of the farmers will not generate the adequate level of the income that it could for the farmers. So this value chain approach is now being integrated in all FAO program. The one example I provided earlier in my presentation was about Chalvuza project, which is operating in GB, in KP, and in Balochistan provinces, in the mountain areas. It has specifically focused on the value chain components of the Chalvuza pine nuts. The old practice was that the villagers are harvesting the Chalvuza pine nuts and then extracting seeds although there were many issues also how this harvesting is taking place. Are they using the right techniques? Are they using the right tools? Because we found out that no, quite often the harvesting process was quite damaging to the trees. So that's why in the project we're also providing tools to introduce to the people so that this is the right type of the tools to use and how to do the harvesting so that you don't damage the trees and then you can generate the sufficient level of the harvest every year. But then in addition, we're focusing on the value chains. And the old practice was that the villages are harvesting these pine nuts and then they're selling it to the intermediaries at a very, very low price. And then the rest of the money, the rest of the income, which from this very high value product would not stay coming to the farmers, not to the villagers. They were staying in the middle, like the people who are buying it from the collectors who are buying this product from the villages, etc. So now we are helping the villagers to come together, and then we are helping them with basic machinery so that the first level processing can be done in their villages. And we recently did launch a first such processing unit in GB, and this is something that will have a lot of positive impact for the villagers, because they will have more economic value of the product to remain in the village. So rather than the economic value being shifted all the way through the value chain. Like I was even hearing stories when from some parts of Pakistan, the Chalguza pine nuts was harvested from here, but then it was sent all the way to China to be processed and packed there, and then sold from there all over the world, including back to Pakistan itself. So that is something that the agriculture value chain approach, it envisages. So the Chalguza pine is one example, but then of course the similar example needs to be integrated on other agriculture products which are produced in the mountain areas. Another example is seed potato production. There are some effort in this direction where the high altitude, high elevation of the area in the mountain areas does provide very conducive environment for producing virus-free seed potato with very minimum economic investments. So, but this needs to be, the whole chain needs to be developed where the seed potato should be multiplied and produced in the mountain areas and then transported to the valley, to the plain areas like, I don't know, like Punjab province, then for multiplication and production. So this whole chain needs to be developed. There were some attempts in the past, but yeah, we're also seeing these areas in FAO program, how we can support.
Okay.
It's a very good question, very timely. I mean, economics behind these whole initiatives will make the work sustainable. That's the most favorable way to go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Muzaffaruddin Saab has a question. To whom you want to ask question, Muzaffaruddin Saab?
Thank you. I think I have question to first to Farooq and then Zehram Saiba, because Imran brought a very important point of this cross-border, because when we talk about biodiversity, or even because as I told you, I live on a border village to China, the last village in China border, and one of their largest river originate from my village, like the Yarkon River. And but one very two, because FAO being an international organization, how we can, like rightly you mentioned about these value chain approach, how we can develop this cross-border value chains, your livelihood or biodiversity learning, because I also knew that you are very actively working in Afghan side, in Badakhshan and in Wakhan. So similar is with China and India and maybe some other neighboring countries. So that is one, that how we can do it. To Zehram Saiba, I think you have shared this very good government initiative of responsible tourism. And I think this responsible tourism also, what is the, we have an initiative or vision for us cross-border responsible tourism, because being from northern Pakistan, I think we have these very important cross-border initiatives. Thank you.
To whom you have asked the second question?
Zegam Saiba.
Zagam Saiba. Okay, fine.
Second was to
okay.
yeah.
First question, Farooq
And
sir,
Kiran,
transboundary
Kiran,
or
sorry,
like a
and
cross.
Kiran, and Kiran,
To Kiran Afzal Saiba, fine.
and Kiran Afzal Saiba. Yeah.
Okay, okay, fine. I understand. That's why, like, I asked you a second time, like, whom
Kind
I have
of.
asked question, because
Yeah, it's
Saba
Kiran
has
Afzal Saiba.
different expertise, and this is this may be like Kiran
Good.
Afzal Saba would be
Kiran Afzal.
responding to after Farooq Saab. Farooq Saab, please go ahead. The value chain cross border and how it could be
Yeah,
possible.
thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Muzaffaruddin, I must admit that you are very lucky to be in such a beautiful place, and then mountains are, you know, gorgeous places where nothing can be better than those environments and sea, and then better place for best place for the human being to live. So you are quite lucky in that sense. On the cross-border trade, in fact, the concept which I was describing, the agriculture value chains, it does include any form of the trade. Rather, either this trade is going to be sort of the commodities, agriculture commodities being targeting the domestic market or international markets. It's both equal. But also there are challenges also for the international trade, because quite often for agriculture commodities, it's much easier to address the target first, the domestic market, because the people in the country, you know better the desires of the clients, like what kind of the product the end users would like to buy in the market or in the supermarket or in the bazaar, doesn't matter. But then it's much more complicated to know these preferences of the consumers in the neighboring countries. So it is still possible. And then the practice shows that, in fact, in the context of Pakistan, like from our experience from FAO side, as you rightly mentioned, we have several projects of agriculture value chain projects in the former FATA area. And then some of them are in the remote mountain areas. And in fact, from those locations, it is much easier for them to target some of the markets in Afghanistan rather than inside Pakistan because of the long distances. So some urban areas of Afghanistan are closer to them. So traditionally, they were trading with those areas, and then they find it logistically easier. So it's possible. Then that kind of agriculture value chains are also quite possible to develop. But of course, there are different standards, depends on the country of the destination. Like, for example, if the commodity is to be exported to the European markets, then the phytosanitary standard requirements will be completely different. If the commodity is to be marketed in the neighboring, the example I gave to the markets to the bazaars in Afghanistan, then there are easier ways of organizing such trade. So I would assume that with marketing to the China connection with Chinese market has its own also specificities, be it from the quality requirements, from certification requirements, from phytosanitary requirements, etc. So it has to be sort of detailedly analyzed commodity by commodity, like what exactly we want to produce in Pakistan mountains and how do we want to sell it and who will be the end user in the other side.
Yeah. Thank you, for Mr. Farooq. Now I would request Kiran Afzal Sahib to respond to Muzaffaruddin Saab's question about tourism. It was like a cross-border tourism, Muzaffaruddin Saab?
Yeah, yes, cross-border responsible tourism.
Cross-border responsible tourism. Kiran Afzal Sahib.
So thank you for the question, Muzaffar Saab, and for your very interesting talk. So I think there are two things which you are referring to. One is the Responsible Tourism Initiative itself, which, as I mentioned, is going to be piloted first in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And it's some of its destinations like Galyat and Kalam and also Naran. And then going forward, we might move towards the border areas like Chitral and then further down in Kumrat. So this is the plan for now, and let's see how the results turn out. For the regional or cross-border tourism, which we basically look at as a regional tourism, there is a lot of, I think, untapped potential to first of all look at faith-based tourism, which is the Gandhara Trail and the Buddhist Trail extending all the way across India, Pakistan, and Nepal. There were initially talks to strengthen that and to provide one tourism product between the three countries in order for the faith-based tourists to cover the entire span of the trail between 7 to 10 days. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, the work on Gandhara Trail is very actively ongoing. The departments of archaeology for KP and Punjab are working on that. Our projects in World Bank are supporting the conservation and planning of 9 of the 18 sites, which are included in Punjab and KP's Buddhist Trail on the Pakistan side. We are going to have to take up the discussion on the regional tourism again. And one, I think, initiative which the government of Pakistan has already launched very successful is the opening of Kartarpur corridor, which is allowing the Sikh pilgrims to travel between the borders. So I guess there has to be elements of responsible tourism included in over there as well, in terms of education of the tourist, information and minimization of waste generation, and other facilities which the local authorities in terms of their capacity and training might need to help manage this influx better and keep the sites clean and hygienic. But we need to pick up the threads on the dialogue around regional tourism once again. So I don't know if you, if that addresses your question partly or completely. So, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kiran Avzal. It's wonderful. You mentioned like you are engaging regional tourism in 3 countries, Pakistan, Nepal, and which one third?
India. So
India.
we want to, there were initial talks, but then there was a halt in those discussions. So we
Okay.
need to pick that up again. Was the initial plan.
Okay.
But
Okay,
right
fine.
now it's not very active, unfortunately.
Right. Thank you, Kiran Afzal Sahaba. Any more questions to the experts? Because we are running out of time. Ji Ashik Sahab, before you ask or comment anything, I would ask you a question of solid waste management that I know like there were several activities that EVK Rusianar has done to cleaning up the mountains. But what about the solid waste management system in the mountain areas, in the residential areas where people are living, and how that is affecting biodiversity?
Well, it's obvious that the presence of solid waste is no good for any area, including the biodiversity. Right? It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the for the surrounding that we live in. EVK2CNR as you know, they have been doing this cleaning of the K2 under a necessity because the whole mountain was polluted with several dirty things, and that's why they had to collect these tons of waste from there and again dumped somewhere else. But that's the only case. The rest of the solid waste thing, we are not that active in the whole of Karakoram and the whole of Hindu Kush and Himalaya, and that is one of the big problem in all these. So I would say that well, not enough. This is something that's there and should be done, but not enough is done on that. Even when we talk of tourism and when we talk of conservation, when we talk of sustainable development, the major component comes this as as how to manage the solid waste. And we invite tourists to come to northern area and to Gilgit-Baltistan and to other places, but we haven't yet formed a policy on how to stop that thing happening. So if the source is there, perhaps we won't be able to really be very happy with that. That's my, again, personal view as well as my organization's view as well. But my comment is about the entire thing which we have been doing today. That today our major focus was on the Karakoram, followed by a little focus on Hindu Kush and somewhat on the Suleiman Mountain. We have 11 mountain ranges in this country. There, the Karakoram, Hindu Kush, and Himalaya being famous are only the three. We go to Suleiman mountain ranges, then we go to the west towards the Chari range and go to the Rasko range and go down to the Kirtar range and in between several others. And they are mostly neglected. We're not doing much about those mountains. So I hope that next time when we meet, perhaps this will be good that we do or say something about those mountains which are neglected. The people are much poorer than we have in the Karakoram. Fortunately, the people in Karakoram, they are getting richer day by day, and I'm very happy with that. So, but people in other mountain ranges, they are becoming poorer by each day. So perhaps if we could focus somewhat during our next episodes, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ashik Saab. I had invited some people from Balochistan and Sindh and our Kalar Kahar side, but unfortunately, they could not be part of the discussions. Definitely, we would like to have more discussion on it next time. Definitely. And any other question, like if someone would like to ask?
Yeah, Munir Saab, if I may, Ashik Saab has raised this excellent point that we do focus on northern areas. And so I just wanted to highlight some of our work that we did in southern Punjab and in the Quest Suleiman mountain range. We've been researching floods. And so I had a chance to go to Ghazi Khan and we visited these areas. These are some of the mountain communities that are not visited by anyone. So when we went there as researchers, first of all, we were told not to go there without security because it was considered that it was sort of an ilaka ghair. But it was fine. We went there and without any security detail, and everybody thought we were from the government. We told them we were not from the government, but they were like, "You're the first people we have seen who've come here to talk about water or anything else for many years. We've never seen anyone here." And so as we talk to people, we realize that, as Ashik Saab had just said, these areas are some of the most neglected areas. So why are they important? The Quest Suleiman mountain range is the source of Rutkoi. So Rutkoi are the hill torrents. So we talk about floods on the Indus a lot, but when it rains, and we talked about the hill torrents up in the northern areas as well, but the hill torrents in the Quest Suleiman mountain range are equally devastating for the communities that are living down.
Okay, thank you.
And so here, the early warning systems, I just want to highlight the role that early warning systems can play in terms of ensuring that the communities are staying well below the Quest Suleiman mountain range. And here the government can play a role and it's not there. And then obviously more development monies need to go towards these communities because they're not being addressed. So I just thought I'll just highlight a tiny small part of what I've seen during our research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Imran Khalid Saab, for presenting some of the achievements that your organization has done in the areas. And thank you so much, Ashik Ahmed Khan Saab. Thank you so much, Farooq Toyrov, Muzaffaruddin Saab, Ali Taqir Sheikh Saab, Zagam Sahiba, Kiran Afzal Sahiba. And also, I have to pay my thanks to Rab Nawaz Saab, Senior Director, WWF Pakistan, for being with on this occasion. And this is really wonderful to have presentations and recommendations and giving us the perspective of development, sustainable development and responsible tourism. And definitely, I think we have also highlighted a point of solid waste management and value chain. Many wonderful points come out of this webinar. The basic objective of this seminar was to highlight such issues in the context of International Mountain Day. And last year, FAO also supported a ninth edition of Pakistan Mountain Festival that was organized at Comsat University. And this year, definitely, because of the pandemic, we are restricted to online activities. But I hope as we will be having much more conducive environment in February, then we will organize a 2-day cultural event and also Pakistan Mountains Pride Awards as well. And this was the initiative that we launched last year in the name of, after the name of some 5 legends working in mountains. The first award was Nazir Sabir Mountaineering Award, and Agostino de Polenza Mountain Conservation Award, Shoaib Sultan Community Development Award, and John Ali Music Award. And this time we will be adding 2 more awards. One is highlighting the stories of the mountains, and the second is about education. Those like who are playing their significant role and had played significant role in educating the mountain communities. And thank you very much. And I hope next webinar will be next Saturday. Dr. Saiba, have you shared your phone number with me so that we could plan our webinar for next Saturday? Please share with me. And once again, thank you very much for being on this occasion and celebrating International Mountain Day. And it is great to have you here. Allah Hafiz. Goodbye.